Good afternoon, everyone. I like to say that I'm Switzerland because my undergraduate was from Pepperdine University. So my University of Arizona sister likes to make sure that I am not a Sun Devil in my undergraduate career. But I want to just thank you for welcoming me to your meeting today. Selk has been a friend while I've been in the legislature. It's an honor to also be here with you, Senator DeConcini, and for your longtime service for our state of Arizona. I have been honored to serve as the Senate Majority Leader in these last 2 years. I was elected by my Republican colleagues at the end of the 2016 election, and I have served as the second female to be the Senate Majority Leader since U.S. Justice Senator Sandra Day O'Connor served in 1973. There was 44 years in between with, no woman serving in this, though we're not talking about identity politics, are we, Chuck? But it was interesting because Sandra Day O'Connor came to the Arizona Senate to visit her old desk, and it was in 2017, one of her last public appearances, and we spoke about what was different that she saw in Arizona politics from the time she served in the legislature as a state senator in the 1970s. And we were on the floor of the state Senate. The legislature was not yet convened. It was quiet. It was just the two of us. And she looked around the desks on the Senate floor and she said, well, first of all, we never had these little trinkets on the desks. As you know, at this Arizona Senate and the House, the legislators decorate their desks with either a Republican elephant or a little donkey if they're a Democrat. And they do it mostly for the kids who watch on the third floor. And when they're up in their seats, they can see who's a Democrat and who's a Republican based on these little decorations on the desks. But she said back when she served, it didn't matter what your party affiliation was. In fact, she didn't even know most of the time who was a Republican and who was a Democrat. They just got the good work done together. And I will always remember that. It was interesting because when I was announcing my run for Arizona Treasurer in my campaign, it was November 29th of last year, so just a year ago. And I had the pleasure of speaking to our former state treasurers, those of them who are still living. And Ernest Garfield was a gentleman who endorsed my campaign, and he also served in the 1970s. Separate from my conversation with U.S. Justice O'Connor, he said, it's interesting, there were so many different people who worked in the legislature back then. I used to serve with a Chinese gentleman back there. I said, I remember who it was. His name was Wing F. Ong. And I said, I think he was a Democrat, and I know you're a Republican. He's, didn't matter back then. So two people serving around the 1970s. Again, things have changed along the way. Not necessarily for the better when we come to reaching across the aisle and working on things together. But one thing that I have learned in my time is how important it is to make that effort. And it showed, at least in my statewide race, I was able to and it showed through the numbers that came in that my work along the years in the legislature with Republicans and Democrats showed when people came out to vote. And some of the text messages that I got on election night came from my Democrat friends that said, congratulations, we supported you along the way. And I think that's important to remember. And when I talk to groups such as yours, I want to just relay how important your involvement is in not only the process of electing great candidates who have these qualities and investing in them as well. Because we can't do it on our own. When we have people who are great candidates, they probably have jobs that pay more than $24,000 a year. You know that a state legislator at $24,000 a year, you can't necessarily find them very easily because they already have full-time employment. They may be business owners. They can't leave their jobs for half of the year to go down to the legislature. And so what happens is you get maybe a lower quality of a candidate who does run and gets elected, and they don't think through the things that others may. And I found very quickly that I was one of just a few who actually had a bachelor's degree when I came to the legislature, much less one who had a graduate degree. And when we talked about issues of the university, it was very unique. I'm a huge supporter of the University of Arizona funding, as you know, and all of our other universities. When we talked about bills on community colleges, many of them said, well, why don't we just go ahead and trash the bachelor's degree and just give everybody a bachelor's degree, whether you're from a community college or a university. Everybody should have the same access and the same price. And I was looking through my, the discussion, and I thought, wow, I'm really surprised we're having this discussion right now, because they aren't really, everybody has different unique areas of education. And if I looked at the people who were making these suggestions, they never even went to a community college or a university, but they were making these decisions. And so it brought to my attention very, very quickly how important it is to pay attention to the people who are running for these very key policymaking roles. Because when we and you all are business leaders, my husband and I also own a business, we are pretty much focused. When we wake up in the morning, we run our businesses, right? I mean, we pay attention to our day-to-day issues. I'm a mom of young children. I make their school lunches every morning. I get them to school. I pick them up. So things like this kind of just come to this other side, and it's not focused, right, every single day. And what happens is, when it comes election time, people just get elected with a very small number of people. And very, very few of those people who actually cast their votes are even looking at the qualifications and paying attention to who's who. And they don't even, in many cases, there are so many surveys and questionnaires out there that we all as candidates have to respond to, so that the voter knows where we stand on issues. There should be no surprises. That's out there, but most voters don't know about that. And so one of the nice things that I really like about SALC is that you guys bring to the table a discussion, and whether they are, a candidate or someone who has just become elected, you allow for them to see what your policy agenda is, and we've done that many times before, and we can exchange those discussions on how you can allow for your policy priorities to come to the table in the legislative process and get to the finish line. Rio's Nuevo was a perfect example. So I was a House member in 2010, and I came over to the Senate in 2013. And right away, when the word Rio Nuevo was tossed around, you had members who were familiar with Rio Nuevo from phase one, right? And they decided, we're not even going to put that on the table, we'll just put it in a drawer, right? Because they had certain preconceptions, a lot of ideas of what had happened in the day. But they didn't know what was phase two, which is today. And when you all and people like your members who make the effort to call my office, give me a tour of the downtown Tucson area, Edmund, thank you. It was in your beautiful Tesla, by the way. We made an effort, and I'm a Maricopa County, Phoenix area legislator. I cannot tell you how important it is for me now as a statewide candidate to make the effort to go outside of Maricopa County, to talk to people in various counties around the entire state about what their priorities are. It's not the same when you hear about it on a telephone call or a memo that in your office. It's not until you actually see and feel what is happening in every one of those communities. I cannot stress to you how impressed I was when I took the downtown tour and saw the development. It was not once, it was twice. It was more times, over the course of the few months, but it was in preparation for a year where we're going to do an extension. And you needed to have more than just Pima County legislators be your advocates. You needed to have people who were across the aisle, people who were in the Republican Party who had those preconceived ideas about phase one and never even wanted to listen to phase two. We needed to bring people to the table who saw the economic development that went beyond Pima County. It affected the entire state. It affected the people who were moving in from other states to our areas to be able to create the booming economy that we now have. This is what we did successfully with the help of so many of your leaders. So when the bill came from the House to the Senate, we knew that there were some challenges in the votes. And so what I did as majority leader was I put together a little lunch. And it was a simple little lunch in the conference room. And guess what? It was so amazing because we started looking at the members who came in. They were the ones who had the idea that they weren't even going to be a yes on this vote. And they started coming in. They started listening. They started looking at the portfolio. They looked at the slide presentations that we had. So even though they weren't able to come to Tucson to see what we were talking about, they were able to now open up the ear. This was done because we made the effort to go out and show them what the the great work was. And guess what? We got more votes than we even anticipated in that proposal. And it was done with effort. I have to say, it was done with effort. When there are so many of these other legislators who come from their own counties, they sometimes just, they think about what's in their neighborhood. So what I do encourage is continuing that great work where you are bringing other legislators from outside the area to come and see your great projects, and that allows. University of Arizona is a perfect example. I sit on the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, and oftentimes we'll have a project that we need to fund, and you really can't understand the impact of it unless you're actually on the campus and seeing how the work is being done firsthand. I also want to take the time to share with you a little bit about my time from going to being in the legislature and then now serving in an executive role. As many of you know, I worked for 2 Republican governors before being an elected official. I worked for Pete Wilson in California in the 1990s. He was in the second of his term, and it was 1996, 7, and 8. And then following his term, there was a Democrat who came in named Gray Davis. Some of you may be from California, so you remember this. I came back home and I worked for the Arizona Senate on the Education Committee for about 5 years, and then Governor Schwarzenegger came in and he pulled out the Rolodex and he realized I don't have any policy people on my team, so he called Pete Wilson and he asked me to be on his cabinet. One of the things I learned in the executive branch, not only in California but here in Arizona, is how important it is that we do have involvement from the business community to speak as advocates for all of these very specific offices. Now, I'm going to be serving in the state treasurer's office, and when we talk about legislative issues, we often look at the economic development roles that these bills play for our policies, but we often ignore sometimes some of these executive offices. But I want to just share with you how important it is that we pay attention not only to these other areas in the statewide. We've got the governor, we've got the attorney general, the secretary of state, obviously, the attorney general, the treasurer, and then the superintendent of public instruction. And when we keep our doors open for continued discussion in these areas, it's going to work for your area and your businesses. I was speaking to, how many of you work in the financial institution? Okay, so who would think that the state treasurer's office would also be interested not only in your work from the investment side, but in financial literacy, for instance? That will be a platform that I will be continuing to pursue as state treasurer. Why is that important? Because it affects the students who come through our education system. I have gone into classrooms and they are not teaching financial literacy, and then they become high schoolers who graduate and they get all of these institutions asking them to have their own credit card for the first time, but they don't even know what interest means or how to balance their checkbook. So in the time that I've served in the legislature, I've done some bills to advance financial education in our schools, but the door will still be open to those players in the business community who deal with credit unions, banking services, all of these areas where you automatically have students who are ready to learn about what you do in your work world and how we can promote that with our school system, with the businesses, and allow for our citizenry to be able to understand how we can manage our personal financial management when they get out of school. And I've also, I'm excited to be able to work with our executive branch areas. The governor's office is something that we are going to continue to work very carefully on. We manage the endowment, as you know, and our universities have their money invested in the endowment, as does K-12. These are areas that affect our school system across the entire state. And for us to make sure that our investments are sound and making sure those dollars are invested not only well but carefully, and we get those into the school system, that is key. But we often ignore that because you kind of think, oh, the money comes from the legislature, it's the general fund. Well, the treasurer's office has a significant role in making sure the money gets to the school system as well. How many of you work in local governments or with local governments? That is a key area of the treasurer's office as well. The treasurer's office manages $15 billion in assets under management, and local governments are able to invest their dollars dollars in the local government investment pool by pooling their dollars together with other local governments or taxing jurisdictions, and they can pool their money together to create a better interest. And that is something I'm going to continue to advance so that our local taxpayers can free up some money and put that into transportation infrastructure and so many other areas. Ted, you're looking at me. I don't know what our time is. Okay, so if you have any questions for me, again, I just want to thank you for your support, and I have, continued conversations with Ted on so many things. That door will still be open as I assume the role of state treasurer, and hope to continue those discussions. Are there any questions?